is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the founder and publisher of Unwinnable. He's currently taking the dad tax out of his son's Halloween candy, Stu Horvath.
Yeah, that kid got so much candy. We did a little loop. We didn't even stop at that many houses, but he had a full thing. And then he met up with a friend. So I stuffed my pockets with all the candy that was in his bucket because it was full. And I went home and maybe made all that candy disappear.
That's what the dad tax is, man. You're not just checking it to be safe. You're just, taking your cut, as my dad used to say. Worked for the IRS for a whole bunch of years. Your neighborhood, what are they giving out? They're giving out the fun size bars. They're giving out the full size bars. What's good?
All sorts of stuff. There, bags of chips, Pokemon cards, you name it. The spider rings.
Yeah,
anything.
Classic.
It's a good melange.
There was a bowl of candy put out on the porch in front of the house that I live in, and they hit me up like, "Oh, hey, could you pull it off the porch around 8:00?" And I'm like, "Sure." So now I have this giant friggin' bowl of candy in my kitchen, and I'm just kind of taking my own tax, which is a little too high in these parts, if I must say, because every $100,000 bar I eat right to the waistline. So today we have a guest on the show. We got asked to participate in a convention in January called the Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo down at the Greater Philadelphia Expo Center in Pennsylvania. And the dude who's putting it on, Ron Meischker, is here to talk about it a little bit with us. And for Stu, who puts on the Geek Flea year after year after year, we know a lot goes into putting on a event, no matter what size. So we thought it'd be cool to have you on. Ron, how you doing today?
Oh, and thank you for having me. I'm doing great.
Just so you know, a little context, Geek Flea is 40 tables in a church. So I feel like whatever you're doing is much more elaborate in a way that I can't even conceive of coordinating or putting on.
Well, any time that you're making gaming space or creating a gathering like that, it's an undertaking. It's anything scalable depending on the amount of staff and volunteers you have, right? So I don't see what we're doing as being any more special than somebody running a little event out of a VFW or a church basement, for example. It's the same thing.
Right on.
Just more square footage and more emails to send back and forth, right?
Yes. The amount of emails has been overwhelming. We spoke a little bit prior to the show about the interest from vendors and game manufacturers who have suddenly, recognized this event is happening and they want to get involved. And, we set up limited vendor space for our first year because you don't want your vendors to come and, they're not to be a good visitor-vendor ratio, and then they don't make money and they're not happy. So I'm a little taken back by the amount of interest we've received, especially over the past 90 days.
Now, it's interesting to me because knowing that many game conventions take place in areas like Wisconsin, Massachusetts, Texas, Philadelphia, really, most people are familiar with the PAX Unplugged that comes December of every year. Outside of that, there really isn't much else going on. So for those who don't know, if you've been to PAX Unplugged, it takes place dead in the heart of Philadelphia in the city. This convention is actually taking place. It's still the Greater Philadelphia area, but it's just outside the main part of the city. And it's actually I've been here before doing trade shows in my previous life as a traveling salesman. It's a larger venue. There's a ton of parking. And even though there's so much space, it's a little more cozier than, say, events that you might go to in a major city. Tell us a little bit about, how you're setting up this space, because I know besides having the vendors, you got a bunch of special guests. You're going to also have a games auction. There's a flea market inside there for games. And as well as, from what I'm reading, 20,000 plus square feet of gaming.
Yeah, that's correct. So we've taken halls D and E at the Greater Philadelphia Expo Center. They're connected to one another. And there's 20,000 square feet in Hall D, which is being dedicated as the primary gaming area at the event. And then you go through basically a giant roll-up door that'll be open, and that's where the vendors area is. So you basically have two areas you can go on site, and the vendors are going to be front and center there. We also have put aside 5,000 square feet of space at the Hilton Garden Inn, which is, our hotel of choice, so to speak, where we're going to have some special events. We're going to have some dinners and breakfasts there with the special guests during the convention weekend, and overnight gaming will take place there, as well as some miniatures and board gaming over in that space.
You know what I've never done? I've never been to a gaming convention. So this is all very new and exciting to me. Hambone, you've been to you've been to Con and Gen Con and
been all over.
I've never been to anything like this, and it sounds delightful.
You know what? And it's funny too, because during the whole run of this show, I'd be going to these conventions. I was like, man, I think you would love this. Like you would, the librarian aspect of your brain would love it. Just like essentially it's because you're going through all these booths, and a lot of people, it's like, what's cool about the RPG conventions is, like, unlike most conventions these days, it's not just all pop figures that people are trying to unload. Like there's actually stuff that you books, older books, stuff that's like kind of D&D and RPG adjacent, as well as the weird stuff that you tend to buy from eBay and capture and put on the Vintage RPG feed on the Instagram, as well as I like going to the seminars at these things. And one of the things I want to point out, we were talking about guests, and Ron, you actually have a couple guests that I don't think I've ever seen at a con, but I'm sure people are really excited to see. So Jeff D is going to be there.
Jeff D, he's an iconic artist from the early days of Dungeons and Dragons, but people sometimes don't realize, he was a driving force behind the Villains and Vigilantes game. And, he's going on to do many other things within the industry, including, he's running an RPG company now. As far as some other guests, novelist Elaine Cunningham. I think most RPG fans know who she is. She wrote several novels for TSR, especially in the Forgotten Realms setting, things like Moonshadow, books like that were extremely popular. Steve Marsh is going to be there. Steve Marsh is a name from the very early days of Dungeons and Dragons. He actually is the person who created the Sahagin monster, in basic D&D. So I think that's pretty significant. And he worked on later editions of the basic and expert companion series modules, box sets. And then, of course, we've got Dale Donovan, who was very active with TSR and Wizards of the Coast as an author in the 90s and 2000s. Wrote Forgotten Realms supplements. Probably the most significant was Cult of the Dragon. And very excited to have these folks out.
What drives you to put together a show? Is this the first one? This is not the first one. This is the second one?
This is the first Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo. It is not my first time running a gaming convention, though it is my first time in this millennium running a gaming convention. So, things are different. Marketing is different. I've learned a lot through the process, but when you ask me what drove me to do this at my advanced age, and kind of coming out of my longtime player and collector's chair to say, no, I want to run a game convention, is there just seems to be this split in the gaming community online. You see people yelling about older individuals who've been involved with the hobby a long time, calling them gatekeepers, trying to keep people out of the hobby. You see the folks who've been around who call themselves grognards in many cases, kind of belittling the later editions of games and things like that. And to me, this is all about sitting down at a table with people and having fun, no matter what you're playing. Just sit down and have fun. And that's the way I've always treated the game. We're all there to have fun in the moment. If we're playing Dungeons and Dragons, it's a fantasy role-playing game. Let's be in that moment and not worry about the outside noise. So I became very frustrated, just watching the vitriol that's out there online. And I said, you know what, I want to do something. I want to run a convention, and I want it to have all aspects of gaming, whether it's, folks who started in the 70s or 80s or new people to the hobby. And I think we've accomplished that. I mean, we've got tons of old school games and game systems running at this convention, as well as all the new favorites that are out there today, and everybody's meshing together. And I'm looking forward to, seeing this dynamic work.
Yeah, right on, man. I mean, we have a philosophy that everyone's welcome at the table. We want to make sure that everyone feels safe and included and not left behind, because it is hard jumping into a hobby where there is a lot of gatekeeping. It's like that in any kind of hobby that you get into. And I think it's important to always be mindful of people and their feelings. And their feelings are generally like, hey, man, I don't want to be treated like less than because I just got into something, or less than because I like the things that I like. Everyone should be encouraged to play the things that they want to play, and to be free to be creative in the way that they want to be creative, and learn some cool stuff about the history, and then find a cool path forward where they can, create weird stuff. And because look, D&D is fucking weird. Let's keep it going, man. And let's be weird together.
Role-playing games are about inclusion at their base. Everybody needs to be involved for the game to be fun, right? If you sit down at a table and you're overwhelmed by everybody else around you, okay, and overshadowed, it's not going to be very fun for you. Everybody needs to be involved. And most importantly, in this day and age, everybody needs to be tolerant of everybody else. So, when you ask why, we're just doing this to have fun, and, we're not excluding anybody. Just come and play the games. And that's really what drove me to say, okay, I want to do this. I want to go ahead and run a convention, even though I haven't done it in 25 years.
What were the conventions? What convention did you run 25 years ago?
The Garden State Games Fair. Ran several years over in New Jersey, up in the Princeton area. Oh, okay. And it was a decent sized regional convention. It attracted anywhere from 500 to 700 people each year, within the confines of the spaces that were available up in that region. And it had a good run. But life took me in a different direction professionally, and there was less time for extracurricular gaming activities like running conventions.
So I've lived in this area of North Jersey forever. I never really felt like there was a lot of game expo kind of options. That might just be because I was just never really exposed to the convention scene. I went to a Necronomicon in Danvers in 1992 or 93. Sure. And that was probably the closest thing that I was aware of. I didn't know about the Garden State show, but that's North Jersey, South Jersey divide. Do you feel like that this area has had a harder time getting an expo scene going? And do you feel like that there was an ebb and flow, that it was more popular and doable, say 25 years ago, and sort of went away and now is having a resurgence?
Yeah, role-playing games are certainly having a resurgence, without question. There were always game conventions in New Jersey, and they were all around the same size. I'm going to say between 300 and 1,000. And part of the issue with being in New Jersey is, you just mentioned North Jersey, South Jersey divide. They're also different markets, above 195 in New Jersey, that's the New York market, right?
Yeah.
Below 195, it's the Philadelphia market. And people really see it as that. But you also have a geographical problem, which is everything to the east is water and there aren't any people there. So, that in of itself, makes it more difficult because your geographical footprint, albeit very populated, is really only three points on the compass, right?
That's really interesting. I never would have thought about that, but that the Lake Geneva is sort of like you could approach it from all directions, and that's sort of important.
Yeah, it's important, but on the flip side of it, the New Jersey and we'll call it the Delaware Valley gaming community is a pretty sophisticated one. Thanks in part to, there's very solid, long-standing game stores in the region. You had a couple complete strategists right here. Now you only have the one in King of Prussia. But, this has cultivated a community going back 30 and 40 years with some of these shops. And I think that's important as well. I just made the decision, if I was going to do it, it had to be closer to an urban area for the reasons I articulated earlier about the whole water problem to the east. I just felt that, Philadelphia is a better fit for what I wanted to accomplish. So that's why I focused in on that area. It also helps that I work in Philadelphia every day, so that helps. One
more thing I want to touch on before we go home on this is you actually set up a charity that you've tied into to Page, which is a gamer assistance initiative. Why don't you tell our listeners about that a little bit?
Sure. It's our gamer assistance program, and GAP for short. And, similar to my earlier comments about looking at comments going back and forth on different gaming social media sites and things like that, there was another trend that I've seen, and that trend is people who have been associated with the industry for years or with the hobby for years seeming to have financial hardships later on. Okay, whether it was they were working in the game industry as an artist or a designer or an author. And then, when they're getting up there in years, they don't have pensions, and they are having trouble paying for simple things like, my roof has a hole in it. And you see, artists out there selling their original works because they need to put a roof on their house. So the idea behind GAP was to identify these folks and see if we could put together a grant fund and then be able to give out grants for individuals that are in need, whether it be, they need home repairs, they have medical emergencies. One person who's been in the game industry for some time that I kind of focused in on, they went back to school later in life and they're going for their doctorates. However, their car broke down and they could not afford an $800 repair. So the idea is to help these people out. And, the term gamer assistance program, it wasn't necessarily intended to fill the role of gap, but we're trying to fill some financial gaps for people who've been associated with the industry for a long time.
Well, very cool, man. I mean, it's always great to give back. And I think that, any kind of person who works in any kind of artistry as a freelancer, it's always tough on the back end. Like, when it's feast, the feast feels like it's never going to end. But then when it's famine, you're trying to rub two nickels together to get a dime. So, I think that's pretty cool. There's a lot of cool things going on at the convention. I'll be there slinging action. Stu will be down selling book and signing book. And, who knows? You might end up finding yourself in a game with one of us, in person instead of on the Discord or over Zoom, which is weird. The idea of like gaming with people, going back to conventions, I'm very excited about conventions. Next year's going to be a big con year for me, but like, I think that, coming through the pandemic, you really do appreciate how much you miss gaming with people in real life and how important it is to have that kind of human connection. But it feels weird. Like, it feels like it's kind of like the first time sitting down at a table again, even though you've been playing for like so many years. I mean, at least that's how it feels for me. So, pretty excited about it. I'm excited to hang out with some friends and make some new friends over the course of the convention. Now, this convention, it is going on at the Greater Philadelphia Expo Center from January 5th at 8 a.m., bright and early, until 5 p.m. on January the 7th. So it's going to be a pretty cool weekend of gaming. We are going to be excited to be hanging out. Ron, thank you so much for coming out about this. We'll put some links to this all over our biz. Is there anything else you want to add about the Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo?
Just quickly, I really appreciate you having me on the show to talk about the expo and talk about gaming in general. And I want to be able to give something back to your listeners. So we've created a special discount code for the convention. If they visit our website at www.phillygamingexpo.com, they go to check out. If they use the discount code Vintage RPG with the V and RPG capitalized, they can save $15 on their badges, and that's unlimited for all of your listeners.
Cool.
Oh, very cool, man. We appreciate that. Well, dude, thanks so much for coming out, and we look forward to seeing you in January. This has been another amazing episode of the Vintage RPG Podcast. Dude, where can people find you on the internet?
They can find me on Instagram at Vintage RPG. I'm sure that there will be stories and posts all about my adventures at Page.
Very cool. You can find me across the internet at John McGuire RPG. I'm on the TikTok. I'm on the Blue Sky. I'm on the Twitter thing. Thank you so much, everyone who backed the Hotel Exorcist. By the time you listen to this episode, we will have wrapped that Kickstarter on Friday. We're fully funded, so if you back that, you can expect a really spooky story ready to knock your socks off that you're going to love playing coming to you in the future. So thanks so much again for getting behind 3, 2, 1 action and backing the Hotel Exorcist. If you like the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Your reviews really do help other listeners to find us. If you really like the show, why not become a patron? Patreon.com/vintagerpg. We've got tiers where you can play RPGs with me once a month. I do a different one every month. I'm not sure what the November theme is going to be yet. I've been kind of swishing around. There's a poll right now on the Patreon. I kind of feel like, as far as October being spooky season, November should maybe be more cozy mystery season. So we're going to figure that out. There's a tier where you can play in a West Marches campaign with Stu. We have early release episodes for as little as $1 a month. You get them at some point on Friday or Saturday, depending on when we record them during the week. We've got a killer Discord community that we'd love for you to be a part of. Patreon.com/vintagerpg. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dega West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.